This is actually a really good question. I posted a video and I referenced the Book of Nazarene, which is an apocryphal work that is hard to place validity on. I would consider a lot of what it says scripture, but at the same time, I wouldn't hold it to the same level of scripture as I do the rest of the books in the Bible. If you go watch through my study tips playlist on TikTok, I've compiled a bunch of videos about these types of things. How to test scripture, why we test scripture, and all kinds of things go into that. How many manuscripts do we have? How old are they? Do they line up with what the rest of scripture has? Are there any other Christian canons that include these books? I mean, there's so many different factors when it comes to, is this scripture or not? And sometimes you find a book that's in this weird gray area where you can't necessarily say it's scripture, but you can't necessarily say it's not scripture either. You just can't verify that it is. In this aspect, I take Paul's advice, eat the meat and spit out the bones. Take what is good and what lines up with scripture and what is beneficial, and everything else that doesn't do that, just throw it away. Don't even worry about it. But there's definitely a lexicon of importance when it comes to what is and is not scripture. Even in the 66-book Bible, there are books in there that aren't as important as other books. The Torah and the words in red of Jesus are by far the most important thing in the entire Bible. I would consider Paul's letters the least important things in the Bible. In fact, there's some apocryphal books I would hold much higher than Paul's letters. For instance, 2nd Esdras. I mean, that book is incredible. Every believer should read that one. We're currently going through a study of that on my YouTube channel. But that was taken out of the Bible in the 1880s. It was considered canon scripture for hundreds of years. And then the church was like, this doesn't really jive with what we're teaching, so we're just going to take it out of the Bible. And no one seems to throw a fit about the 14 books that they took out of the Bible in the 1800s. All of those 14 books I consider to be scripture. Along with books like the Shepherd Hermas, the Didache, 1st Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilees, I consider all of those to be scripture, and there are canons, Christian canons today, that still have those books included in them. A lot of people will say, oh, these books contradict scripture. They don't contradict scripture. They contradict the doctrine that you have chosen to believe, though, and there's a big difference. We see people like Peter, Jude, Paul, and even Jesus quoting apocryphal books. There's probably a reason.